Notification of final result of 2017 census and accordingly adjust seat for Provincial Assembly, National Assembly and Senate from Karachi. Without actual census figures, the budgetary allocations are meaningless. These are the aims and object of our mission. So we just want everybody to be to give support of this aim and object. Thank you very much.
नहीं है, इससे पहले हम काफी सेमिनार कर चुके हैं। खासतौर से जब हालात हम देखते हैं कि बजाय बेहतरी की तरफ बढ़े, बिगड़ते ही जा रहे हैं। आज भी जिस दिन हमने मुकर्रर किया था इस सोच के कि नमाज के बाद कुछ तौफीक लोगों को आती है तो कायदे से जो है अपना काम करेंगे, अपना कारोबार संभालेंगे, कराची शहर को कुछ बेहतरी ले आएंगे। लेकिन पता चला हमें आज सुबह को कि आज हड़ताल है, सारी दुकानें बंद है और ट्रैफिक की जो है बंद। और ये जो पहिया जान जो है इससे कुछ हमारे मेहमान जो थे आने से कुछ घबरा रहे थे। बहरहाल जब हमने दुआ कर लिया अल्लाह से कि देखिए नेक नियत के काम कर रहे हैं, तो जब नेकी होती है तो अल्लाह का साथ भी होता है और आप सब मौजूद है। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। This is in continuation of our endeavor to restore good governance, and we have been on this path for a very long time. Most of you sitting in this hall are fully aware that Pakistan has suffered for the last 50 years from bad governance. This is clearly established by the collapse of all our social institutions. The government, economy, education, healthcare, religion, leaving behind a huge unresourced population, abysmal human and debilitated infrastructure, and economy in perpetual crisis, and political and social instability, along with the constant of political and sectarian conflict. What does this indicate? It clearly shows the intransigence of all the governments we have had in the last 50 years. These are the lost decades. Today we are faced with more challenges by the onslaught of COVID-19, climate change, and this is also fluctuating. Just as our economy fluctuates, our political rhetoric fluctuates, our tempers fluctuate, so everything that is a part of our system is not constant except the fluctuation. Is my voice clear now? We abuse them, we do not honor anything that should have made us what were we in the early 50s and the 60s, the ancient giants. What are we today? I mean, if we were to have just simple common sense, we would find with a man on the street. They would understand that the lack of public institutions, policy planning, their limited capability, and their pathetic sustainability mechanisms to handle the regular influx of migrants to the city has to be corrected. Karachi suffers both in the livability index in Pakistan, languishes at 152nd position in the Human Development Index, which is based on the social indicators of health, education, and economic growth. What will happen to Karachi when 50% urbanization takes place in the year 2025 till 2030, that is the forecast. Take of Karachi. Already you see, we don't have any civic utilities. We starve for water, we starve for clean air, we have no transport. And if its population increases, what will Karachi do then? Have you really thought about it? It's not my problem. I don't think I will be alive by that time. But most of the younger generation will be, and you've got to start thinking very, very seriously, especially on policy plans. Again, if properly handled and honestly executed, urbanization can lead to higher productivity. I'm sure Dr. Hafiz Bashi will talk about that. Increase manufacturing for all our industrial brothers, great export, and satisfactory. So in the end, I would just like to say that those who study history realize that history doesn't forgive anyone, whoever you may be. And if you value the judgment of history, I think, let us not follow the path of those who have blessed this country in the misery that we all are suffering from now. Because we once upon a time had great leaders. We had the Head-e-Azam, and we say this is a nice city. We had Nawab Ismail Khan. We had so many from the Liaquat Ali Khan. Liaquat Ali Khan didn't leave any property for his children. And today, this is the time when you see that everyone who comes into the seat of power, where has a common man ever come to a seat of power in Pakistan? The day when a man like that comes into the seat of Pakistan, I think I'll be the first person to carry the flag and say, Pakistan Zindabad.
आपकी जल्दी तारीफ की जाएगा क्रेडिट वो और उससे ज़्यादा मुझे तो डॉक्टर साहब को इंट्रोड्यूस करना है जी तो ये अच्छा देखिए डॉक्टर हफीज पाशा के तो मैं noticed when he was giving out this publication which doesn't have the same intensity and glamour that it had when he was present here because we had lost him to the beloved city of Lahore and city of Noor Jahan and Jahangir and so on. But his Begum Pasha is recently been the finance minister of the government of Punjab, and like all of us being beautiful husbands, he's also followed details there. But we welcome you here because, especially, I'm most grateful to you for accepting the invitation because I know that the doctors had recommended that you should not travel by air because of certain health reasons, although you were looking fresh and handsome when I first saw you, but still, there is very kind of you to take the trouble, especially for this. We came here especially for this. So please, let's give a good hand to our chief guest.
Honorable Chairperson, Governor Kamal Asfar, and dear all of you, most welcome to this wonderful event. For me, this is an event of great personal importance because I have spent over 40 years of my life in this beautiful city of Karachi, out of which over half of that was spent in teaching poor students at the University of Karachi. We gave up. I had the opportunity, of course, of being a professor at MIT. I gave up. I said, I'm going to go back to my country and teach young and poor students. So I'm very happy I've accomplished that. As a matter of interest, I was referred to initially as Dr. Hafiz Sheikh. He happens to be the present finance minister. I can understand the confusion because 20 years ago I was there. But the interesting thing is that Hafiz Sheikh is a former student of mine. So I can claim the fact that one of my students and young colleagues is the finance minister of Pakistan. He's also from the University of Karachi, educated at the Applied Economics Research Center. So ladies and gentlemen, let me take you through the story of Karachi. Growing up as a child, very young, going to the Karachi Grammar School of that time in the 60s. It was located at one end of Sadr, if you remember. And the amazing thing about that memory of mine is the fact that every evening Sadr used to be washed clean. There were people who would wash the town clean. This was our vision of Karachi as a child. And it was also very interesting. Those of you who lived in Karachi, we used to have a tram service going from Sadr all the way to Karachi Kent station. And once in a while, when we wanted to be adventurous, we would travel on that lovely tram. And those were the happiest days of our life. Karachi was a truly, truly wonderful city. And come the 70s, we saw in Karachi enormous investment in infrastructure. That, in some ways, was the golden period. We saw a new port being built, Port Qasim. We saw the Pipri marshalling yard being built. We saw the Atomic Energy Commission setting up offices. We saw the Pakistan steel mills being established. A number of other initiatives, including that, in some sense, the 70s, the time when we had a Prime Minister from Sindh, was in some sense, to me at least, the glorious, wonderful, golden period of growth of Karachi. Unfortunately, since then there has not been enough adequate. You see, this is a classic case of the goose which lays golden eggs, continues to lay golden eggs, perhaps a few less, but the rest of the world takes it for granted. We have to sone ke ande dega hi dega. This is the tragedy with our beloved city. And the reason why I finally went to Lahore is that, as a child, I spent some time. My daddy was the general manager of the railways in the 60s. So I grew up in a place called Mio Gardens also. Manufacturing and 50% in exports. This is unbelievable. The other thing to note is the fact, and this is the most powerful set of statistics. The chairperson has already made this point. Let me reiterate this point. This is a city which lays golden eggs in the form of revenues, which accrue to the rest of the country, and very little comes back. Now, what is the magnitude of this transfer? You will be pleased to know that as per 2018-19 statistics, which we dug up with great difficulty over the last 3 weeks, Karachi city contributes 56% of national tax revenues. A city with a population share of 8%. 7 times in per capita terms. The people of Karachi, the businessmen of Karachi, the traders of Karachi, the salaried professionals of Karachi, making the biggest contribution to Pakistan. And I want to place on record, thank you, the people of Karachi and the businessmen of Karachi and the entrepreneurs of Karachi for providing the basic lifeline for your country, Pakistan. Some people, of course, who are cynics turn around and say that, oh, big Karachi gives that share because the Karachi port is here and a lot of the revenues come from the Karachi ports and they are actually revenues which are due to consumption by people in the upcountry and so on and so forth. Yes, that's partly true. But a statistic which took us a day or two to compute, and I am a professor committed to integrity. This is a quotable statistic. It can be defended. Okay, 60% all revenues, 46% domestic revenues. So, sales tax on domestic industry, domestic manufacturing, income tax on local domestic Karachi income, and excise duties on Karachi factories account for 46% of revenues. This is amazing. A city which has a tax to GDP ratio, if we take the original 60%, 6 times, 7 times the national tax to GDP ratio. Have you ever heard of this? Such a big difference. I mean, I have to take my hat off to the taxpayers of Karachi. Their productivity, their honesty, their declarations. They are a different class of people. And have we recognized them? Have we made a respected contribution to their efforts? No, we have not. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do we need to do now? It's about time this goose which lays golden eggs is not taken for granted. And the time has come purely for efficiency reasons. Nobody wants a favor. Karachi is the efficiency hub. You invest in Karachi, you get 6 times as much revenue as you get from elsewhere in the country. Nobody is asking for a favor. We saw what happened in the 70s and it sparked off a bubble of growth in the 80s in Karachi. Do that again. Purely from an efficiency point of view, investment in infrastructure in Karachi. Why is it that Karachi, the most productive part of the country, still has a load shedding problem? When Pakistan is embarrassingly now surplus in power, this is completely unacceptable. So, minimum we need to invest in the infrastructure of the city. The city is so productive, it gives you 6 times the return, public return. So, let us please go ahead and invest. So, what are the precise measures that we need to take? First, let me talk of the government's plan, and then I'll come to what I think the private sector needs to be supported in terms of our efforts. The two governments of at the federal level, the PTI government and the People's Party government at the Sindh government level have, after the floods and the devastation to Karachi, announced a development plan of 1100 billion rupees. Sounds like a significant amount. Let me tell you that historically the city has received public investment hardly 20 billion rupees. And if this were to happen, then the amount invested in Karachi would go up to beyond 350 billion rupees annually. Wonderful. And this would go towards all the critical sectors: mass transit, Karachi circular, this solid waste, the basic problem of, in fact, to me, the fundamental problem of water, 400 million gallons more. All this can be invested. And the returns huge for the country, especially those in the more underdeveloped parts of Pakistan, because this money from Karachi via the NFC goes to the Federation and then disproportionately goes to the poorer provinces of Pakistan, particularly Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Nothing could be better. Here is efficiency and equity combined. In economics, we call it Pareto optimal. It's a simple and obvious solution. Use the efficiency of Karachi, get the revenue gains, use them for equity of the rest of the country. This is the message. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I was also carrying this for some time. This number, 1100 billion, is totally up in the air. I hope I'm not going to be quoted, but let me say that if 60% of this 1100 billion is presumed the share of the federal government, and 40% is the share of the provincial government, then, ladies and gentlemen, the plan is to be implemented in 3 years in these critical sectors that I have talked of. What does this mean? Is it feasible financially? The big answer is no, no, no. Why? Because it implies that out of the federal public sector development program annually for the next 3 years, 1/3 of the development plan will have to go to Karachi. The PSDP funding, 1/3 of that will have to go if you want to get to this target of 1100 billion. It's even more in the case of the Sindh government. If the Sindh government is to pick up its 40% of its share of 1100 billion and implement programs within 3 years, spend the money, it will have to divert half its annual development program to Karachi. From near zero, you are moving to 1/3 and 1/2. Will this happen? Do you think it will happen? I hope to God that the decision makers in terms of allocation of funds to projects will be willing to make this dramatic shift towards Karachi. Sindh today is a deficit province. Not many people know this. Today, Sindh is borrowed 20 billion rupees from the banking system. It will not be even in a position to implement its development program, which is approximately 200 billion rupees. How are we going to put 100 billion rupees into Karachi? So what are the options? I'm sorry, my humble assessment is this 1100 billion is in paper, and if they cannot do the 1100, at least do the 2 or 3 most critical investments, the one particularly water, mass transit, and clearing and upgrading the Kachi abadis and reducing poverty. What do we need to do, ladies and gentlemen? Yet again, the people of Karachi will have to fight for their own, work for their own collective interest and contribute towards this. 2 or 3 measures. I'll give you some terrible statistics on the size of Karachi Metropolitan Corporation's budget managing the basic municipal services of Karachi. KMC has a budget of about 24 billion rupees. Do you know the corresponding budget of the Mumbai, previously known as Bombay, Municipal Corporation? Karachi's budget in dollar terms is $450 million a year. The budget of Mumbai Municipal Corporation is $5 billion a year. Almost 12 times as much. Mumbai, a city with a population just barely above Karachi. If we take the Karachi's correct population, which I think is about 18.5 to 19 million, our researchers revealed that. Interestingly, what used to be our poor cousin or brother, Bangladesh, the Dhaka Municipal Corporation. Of course, the population of Dhaka is 23-24 million, significantly above that of Karachi. The budget of Dhaka Municipal Corporation is $1 billion, twice Karachi. Why? The reason is both these cities, particularly Mumbai, does a much better job in mobilizing people of the city. 2 things are required. One, kindly government of Sindh, as per the provisions of the Constitution, kindly hand over the urban immovable property tax to Karachi. कराची को दे दें, आपको इतनी मेहनत के बाद, साल भर की मेहनत के बाद 2 अरब 2 billion from property tax is so embarrassing. The amount of corruption in the excise and taxation department and so on. Hand it to the local government of Karachi, and a local government which is empowered, an integrated, empowered local government which has the supervision and the coordination responsibilities of all local authorities and agencies in the city. It has to be a truly integrated local government with the mayor effectively as the chief executive of the city government. For God's sake, big cities in the world, New York, Mumbai, Beijing, all have city governments. They can only be run with integrated city governments. You can't have little fragments here and there doing their own little business. First thing, hand over property tax. Let the people of Karachi, the municipal corporation of Karachi, develop its capacity. A rough, modest estimate of the revenue that we could collect from a decent, not a very oppressive property tax regime from Karachi people is 25 billion rupees. 2 billion ke bajaye, with a little bit of effort and self-dependence, 25. Second, and this is where we will need to use the forum and other agencies to do what is done for priority special infrastructure financing throughout the world. And what is that? Accredited municipal bonds. We have to allow Karachi to be able to afford its municipal bonds. Duly underwritten by the private sector of Karachi. I have complete confidence in the private sector, the business community, there's some sitting there, who will gladly pick this up because they know that if the city becomes even more efficient with infrastructure, and they will get the normal return. On top of the normal return, they are going to get in better, more efficient, better availability of infrastructure, their production levels go up, they export more. So I am confident that not only will the people of Karachi buy these municipal bonds, but hopefully others too, outside Karachi, who continue to have faith in the progress in this city. So ladies and gentlemen,